Hey everyone, John here from Peralta.ai. This is the exposure read on the current live portfolio after the trades have been made. The model gave us a top 25 list, but the positions we now own are what actually create risk. So the question here is not just which stocks did the model pick. The better question is what bets are now sitting in the portfolio. We are comparing the current 25 name portfolio against the latest 100 name Canadian equity universe. The first thing that jumps out is simple: there are no bank holdings. Before interpreting that, I'll quickly anchor what data we are comparing. So this is the using the save live portfolio after execution. It's not a backtest substitute. It's not a hypothetical watch list. So this is a post-trade exposure read. What the strategy owns now before we know whether these active bets will pay off. There are two benchmark lenses. The first is equal weight, which is clean for research because every universe name gets the same starting weight. The second is source weight, which is closer to market cap intuition because larger companies matter more. That distinction matters. Equal weight tells us what the model selected. Source weight tells us what the economic exposure we are missing. The portfolio isn't sector neutral. The biggest overweight is information technology. The biggest underweight is financials. That's a major point because the Canadian market is structurally heavy in financials, energy, and materials. So this portfolio avoids banks and leans into resource-linked names. Performance may be driven as much by sector and macro exposure as by individual stock selection. The cleanest finding is that the portfolio owns 0 of the 6 major Canadian banks. Against an equal weight benchmark, that is a 600 basis point bank underweight, but the source weight view makes the point much sharper because banks are a large weight in the Canadian market. I would not immediately call this wrong. Avoiding banks could be exactly what the model wants right now, but it is too large to treat as a random side effect. Since the trades are already in the book, the next question is whether this bank underweight is unintended live bet or something we need to hedge, cap, or reverse in the next decision cycle. On the other side of that underweight, the strategy is leaning into resources. Materials plus energy are 60% of the portfolio versus 40% of the equal weight universe. This is a real resource cycle tilt. It likely gives the portfolio sensitivity to gold, uranium, oil, the Canadian dollar, rates, and commodity sentiment more broadly. That can be a valid source of return. The only mistake would be pretending it is pure stock selecting or stock picking alpha if the return is really coming from a macro or commodity regime. So because this is a top 25 equal weight portfolio, every selected name gets 4%. In the equal weight 100 name benchmark, every name gets 1%. So that means every holding is mechanically a 300 basis point overweight and every non-holding is mechanically a 100 basis point underweight. So that's useful, but it can hide what actually matters. Missing a small 1% name is not the same as missing Royal Bank or TD. So for single name risk, the source weight view is the better lens. The main takeaway is that the most important underweight are large non-held companies, especially banks and mega cap financials. So the portfolio is not just buying the biggest names in the universe, its average source rank is lower than the broad universe average, which means that the strategy is reaching further down the list. That could be good if the model is finding stronger mid-cap opportunities, but it also raises capacity, liquidity, and implementation questions. This is where a research signal becomes a portfolio management question. Now that we own these names, we need to monitor whether position size, spreads, liquidity, and turnover are eating into the edge. The next lens is the factor exposure from the same price history features used by the model. This slide looks at momentum, recent returns, volatility, and drawdown. The portfolio has a clear momentum footprint, but it also carries higher volatility and worse drawdown characteristics than the broad universe. That matters because if the strategy works, we need to know why. Was it true stock selection? Was it momentum? Was it the resource tilt? Or was it a combination of all three? That is the whole point of attribution. Separate the model's claimed alpha from the risks that came along for the ride. The current portfolio is making 3 active bets. The first is the underweight banks and financials. Second, it is overweight resource cycle exposure. Third, it is not concentrated in the largest benchmark names. It reaches further down. None of that automatically invalidates the model. These bets might be compensated, but they should not be accidental. The key portfolio manager question is this: is the bank exclusion a real signal we are comfortable holding live, or is it an unintended result of the ranking model plus the top 25 equal weight rule? So the next packet or the next focus for the decision cycle should not just explain why we bought the portfolio. It should stress test the bets that we already own. I would not just accept the current top 25 at face value now that it is live. The next package should include a sector constrained shadow book, a bank minimum variant, commodity regime attribution, a hold buffer policy, and a side-by-side reporting versus equal weight and source weight benchmarks. The alpha memo should be explicit which live bets are intended, which are tolerated, and which need guardrails before the next rebalance. So the question is not, is this exposure wrong? The question is, are we getting paid for it? So to close this presentation off, that is the value of the attribution work. It turns a model output and an executed book into a cleaner portfolio decision for the next rebalance. But yeah, if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. Until next time, bye.